The Jade Necklace, a ghost story by Carly Robinson. October 31st, 1947. Our village is much like any other in this country. As people go about their lives from season to season, wheeling in and out of each other's business with a sheen of respectability that belies the murky truths beneath. Ours is like any other rural community. Young families with boisterous children, the busybodies and do-gooders selling raffle tickets to fund the church roof repairs, the familiar faces of pastor, policeman, librarian and shopkeep, the elderly who remember the old days but forget the new. All rub along from year to year in the traditional patterns of village life. We attend the church fetes, remembrance parades, harvest festivals and Christmas carols with a mixture of good humour and boredom. But there is one seasonal celebration that we do not observe. After the hay is brought in and the first frosts have crisped the windfalls on the ground, we turn inwards to stoke our fires and lock the doors. For the darkening of All Hallows' Eve is the only night of the year we stay separate and silent. Not hear the sound of excited children running from house to house collecting candies. Not hear the fancy dress costumes or carved pumpkin faces glowing from window displays and high-spirited shrieks of laughter. Even our cats are brought inside to scratch at the doors until the night has passed. In our village, Halloween is a night we try to forget. This year is no exception, but there has been a change in the air, a souring on the tongue like rotten cherries. I feel it in my bones as they creak like the barn door in the wind. This year is different, and the time has come. As I write this to you now, I know he is walking down the empty street, reaching out to us, calling for someone to acknowledge him. I know their bolts are drawn firm and their curtains have been pulled tight across so they do not see him pass their homes. But they hear his small voice and the gentle tap, tap, tap upon their doors. They pretend to each other it is just the wind, but the words hang limp in the stale air above their heads as soon as they are spoken. And they know in their hearts, he is come to take me back. Back to Blackheath Manor on the hill, where my story will now end. The door is opening, and the Black Knight comes in with him. He is, as I remember, small, fair, and pure in his innocence. How I have missed him. He holds out his hand to me. My life lays open on these pages, and I commit them to your judgment now. At last, everyone shall know the truth of it. September 1887. I left a prestigious post as a matron at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, London, to take up the position offered to me by the master of Blackheath Manor. Upon my arrival, I found myself waiting at the dark iron gates, my suitcase and letter of employ clutched in hand, should I need to prove my identity to the staff who would admit me. It was not necessary. The groundsman greeted me at the gates, introduced himself simply as Jim, and walked me down the long drive to the front entrance of the house, without any requirement of an introduction myself. He seemingly knew my name and purpose, and delivered me into the hands of the housekeeper without a word, while I marvelled at the size and grandeur of the building in which I was to now live and work. Mrs. Dawson offered a polite yet hurried welcome, explaining the master of the house, my employer, was in town on business, but would be back by 7 for dinner and would speak to me then about my duties. She led me directly to my quarters, but pointed out various rooms and passages, many not lit and leading into darkness, by way of a rushed tour of the house. As we approached the east wing where I was to stay, the sound of a baby crying seemed to only heighten her anxiety to quit this burdensome task and attend to the child. "I shall have the maid bring you up some tea and sandwiches, Miss Riddle, so you can settle in. Dinner will be at 7:30 and you're to meet the master in the library beforehand so he can speak to you in private." "Thank you, Mrs. Dawson, that is most kind. But I'm here to work, so happy to start right away, and see to the child if you would show me the way." "No, miss. I must continue to see to the boy. The master has specifically requested he speak to you first before you take up your duties." Her eyes darted back to the corridor towards the sound of distress. I was certainly perplexed at this pronouncement, as I was very much eager to get to work and meet the mother and child I had come to care for. But she had rung the bell in my room and nodded her goodbye before closing my door and moving swiftly down the corridor in the direction of the cries. I strained to listen, in an attempt to hear some sign from the mother, but resolved I must be too far away from them to hear properly, and set about unpacking my belongings in the now quiet stillness of my new room. At 6:30 I left my room and made my way through the maze of corridors and staircases, retracing my earlier steps to find the room that Mrs. Dawson had pointed out to me as the library. The cries of the child had abated, but I could still hear a low and solemn sobbing. Muffled, but discernible. I hesitated, wanting to go towards the sound and to offer comfort, but checked myself and turned down the stairs. I wanted to be ready and waiting to make a good impression upon my employer. Not only for propriety's sake, but to gauge his responsiveness to my ideas about the medical condition of his wife. During my time at St. Bartholomew's, I had encountered several women suffering from melancholia following the birth of a child, and I was endeavouring to research forms of medical treatment to alleviate their suffering, which I hoped to trial on Lady Ayrton. I was considering how to approach the subject when the door opened at the exact moment the clock chimed 7, and in strode Lord Ayrton. "Miss Riddle, thank you for coming. As expressed in my letter, my wife is in need of some medical correction following the birth of our son. Her condition has been going on too long now, and I am concerned for his welfare. She's not caring for him as she should, and we've already imposed too much upon Miss Dawson's time and can no longer expect her to carry on acting as nanny as well as housekeeper." I smiled in acquiescence and nodded to show I understood. I could see it was prudent to let him finish his speech before I offered my opinion. He continued. "My wife had planned a grand ball to celebrate our son's birth many months ago, and it is to be attended by many important peers of mine. It would be inconceivable to cancel now, but in the same instance I cannot allow my wife to be present in her current state. It would reflect badly on me, and I have much at stake in this engagement. It must go off without any issue. As well as taking primary care of my son while my wife is indisposed, I wish you to administer a corrective tonic to her, whether that be a medical variety or a behavioural one. Does not matter. But she must be brought round to her senses. This hysteria cannot continue, and it cannot get out that she is wrought by this madness. Do you understand?" I nodded gravely. "Yes, sir, of course. I have seen this condition in new mothers many times, and have some success in relieving their suffering." "It is not my wife that suffers, Miss Riddle. It is my son. He is the heir to this estate, and therefore my only priority. You will do what is necessary to restore his mother to him, and if she is beyond salvaging, then you shall make arrangements for her to be admitted to the Richmond Sanatorium." On this pronouncement he turned and left the room. I knew the sanatorium to be a place of dubious medical repute. Its clientele were rich husbands who needed a secure place to dispose of their now inconvenient wives. All were admitted under the name of hysteria. My introduction to Lady Ayrton and her son was made the next day, as a dishevelled-looking Mrs. Dawson ushered me into the nursery. Relieved to at last have her caring duties rescinded, what I found before me was a dismal display. A room in chaos with clothes and papers strewn haphazardly about the place, and what looked like black cinder marks streaked across the wallpaper in a peculiar pattern. The lady lay quietly weeping on a couch turned to the wall, while her child, also turning to tears, reached out for comfort from his bassinet. "There's no helping her, miss. She's been given over to this melancholia since the child was born. Nothing I can say or do has any effect on her, not least the babe in her arms. She positively shrinks from him." Mrs. Dorman lamented, shaking her head and looking onward with compassion at the scene. "It will be all right now, Mrs. Dawson, do not worry. I have had much experience dealing with women suffering in this manner." "When was the doctor last brought in?" I inquired. The housekeeper looked up at me furtively and began to tidy the mess at our feet. "Well now, the master doesn't like the people of the village to know our business, so we haven't seen the doctor these past 2 months, not since the child was born," admitted she, colouring no doubt with remorse. "I can't go against his orders," she offered by way of reproach at my undoubtedly astounded expression. "Mrs. Dawson, this cannot go on. The doctor must be sent for immediately. Lady Ayrton is clearly in need of medication to help her state of mind and her physical discomfort," I exclaimed, pointing at the poor woman who clutched her stomach as she tried to manoeuvre into a smaller shape on the bed. "Oh, but miss, she's quiet now. But you don't know the extent of her raging," quivered the housekeeper as she flicked nervous glances over to the quailing heap in the corner. "It's not just this constant sobbing. It is more." She trailed off, seemingly unwilling to continue her explanation. "I've no doubt about that, Mrs. Dawson. But the course of action remains the same. We must fetch the doctor so he can prescribe medicine to ease her suffering. Please send for him at once." I set about attending to the child, who was now crying steadily, picking him up and rocking him with a soothing tone and movement. But the housekeeper would not budge. "I can't. She speaks of a devil, miss. Her ravings are always the same, and she persists in accusing the master of bringing it upon her. That is why we are not allowed to fetch the doctor. The master don't want the extent of her madness to be known to anyone outside the household." Impatient with this turn of the conversation, I tried to give the woman to understand these delusions of the mind were more common than she knew, and it was nothing the doctor would be surprised by. "She says she is cursed, that the devil came out with the child, and that's why she gets in such a state when she is left alone in the room with him, let alone any attempt to mother him. It is impossible to reason with her, miss." "Very well, Mrs. Dawson. I'm sure you've done all you can. I shall take this into my own hands now," I said as I ushered her out of the room. I was prepared to listen to no more of this, and once the door was closed behind her, I set about covering Lady Ayrton with a blanket, as her thin and dishevelled nightgown offered no protection for the chill which permeated the room, evidenced by her pitiful shivering. "There, there, madam. I am here to take care of you both now. Do not fret. I promise you will be well again." I smoothed the matted hair away from her face, and saw her eyes dart to mine in what can only be described as fear. Her skin was cold to the touch, and I resolved to help her warm up with a bath as soon as the child was settled. I picked up the babe and rocked him with a lullaby to soothe him back to sleep. I had no doubt he was in need of human contact. Although his physical needs of food, warmth and toilet had been adequately taken care of by Mrs. Dawson, he had been thus far starved of his mother's affection. As soon as a caring embrace was given, I was sure he would respond and the reported nightly crying would cease. While I beheld him, feeling sorry for his plight and that of his mother, his eyes seemed to engage with mine in a questioning gaze. I knew this could not be the case, as newborns cannot focus in the first months, But he had stopped his noise and looked at me in silent contemplation. Then, with a certain blankness, his eyes moved slowly over my shoulder and fixed there, as if he were looking at someone standing behind me. I thought nothing of this until his mother's sobs became louder and more shrill. Spinning around to see what caused this relapse of emotion, I found her up on her knees with arms splayed in the air, as if suspended by her wrists in shackles. The sight was so odd, so out of place that I did not know at first how to respond, merely gaped at the figure before me, like an uncanny version of Christ on the cross. Upon recovering my senses, I went to lay the child down in his bassinet to attend to her, but when I turned again, she had slumped down onto the bed in a heap, almost as if the invisible rope that had suspended her had been cut. Frantically scrabbling into the corner of the bed, she muttered again and again, "Please don't pick him up. We shall be punished." October 2nd, 1887. My employment at Blackheath Manor these past 3 weeks becomes stranger and more trying by the day. I've recorded the habits of both mother and child for my own researches, but the more time passes, the more difficult it becomes to confirm my initial prognosis. I sent for the doctor against Mr. Dawson's advice, but the medication he prescribed has not had the anticipated outcome. Lady Ayrton continues to become distressed at nights, and the child is singularly withdrawn, seemingly unresponsive to my care, with his worst bouts of anguish starting up at midnight and continuing through to the small hours. I return to my room as daylight breaks, as exhausted as he, but I cannot sleep even then, as my attempt to record these nightly trials brings stranger thoughts to my mind. At the time unperceived, but as I recall them, they seem even more troublesome. The child is always peaceful until some object of perception captures his glance, and his eyes remain fixed as if looking behind me. I have even taken to standing against a wall when I hold him, but to no avail. His cries are exacerbated by his mother's, which chime in sequence. When one starts, so does the other, and on it goes until dawn. My employer, I know, has deemed my current stay a satisfactory amount of time to determine the position which he now endeavours to take. He has instructed me to make arrangements for Lady Ayrton at Richmond Sanatorium. Yet I cannot. This case goes against all my medical training and experience, and I know something is not right here. It is not simply a matter of removing the poor wretch of a mother, though I am sure her distress is linked to that of the child, but she does not ascribe to the delusional breakdown of any patient I have ever seen. There are times during the daylight hours, when the child is asleep in the nursery and she in the anteroom with me, that her senses are as sound as mine. She talks of the house and the parties she used to hold in her early days as a bride. This afternoon she explained that her husband travelled a great deal when establishing his import business, and would bring her trinkets and oddities from overseas. The last of these being a beautiful jade necklace from Malaysia, with elaborate markings upon the stones. Upon his return, he insisted she wear it regularly, and received much admiration and attention from it at the dinners and parties they attended. It was a substantial piece of jewellery, and she felt its weight sit unusually heavy on her chest, until one day she decided not to wear it anymore, and put it away in her cabinet of jewels for display. It was on this day that she discovered she was with child, and relieved by the prospect of a son and heir, Lord Ayrton subsequently rescinded his demands regarding the wearing of the necklace, lest the weight should cause her discomfort in her pregnancy. As she spoke, I marvelled at her lucid speech and clarity of thought, compared to the nighttime ramblings and ravings. It was almost as if a fog had lifted long enough for her to shine a beacon to a well-trodden path. It was this glimpse of rationality that confirmed my intention to prevent her banishment. October 15th, 1887. I have formulated a plan. I cannot reveal it to Lord Ayrton, who grows more impatient and severe with every day that passes in stasis. I have already had to deceive him regarding the arrangements for his wife's committal. I have assured him all is in order, and that I have organised her transportation to the sanatorium. If all goes accordingly, he will be none the wiser, and her removal from the house will fit with his expectations. In actuality, I have made arrangements for her to be taken to an altogether different kind of establishment, a little-known infirmary, which caters specifically for women suffering from melancholia following the birth of a child. My former colleague and friend from St. Bartholomew's has agreed to take her in, on the proviso that I follow directly to help her in the management of her burgeoning institution, as it grows in patient numbers much quicker than she had anticipated. I have set the date of the move to coincide with the grand ball, so that my employer will be too preoccupied with his preparations and arrival of guests to notice my own movements. I know my plan is a dangerous one, but the more I have observed, the surer I am of my commitment to get her out. There is something wrong in this house, and it does not lie in the mind of poor Lady Ayrton. October 30th, 1887. Tomorrow night is the grand ball, and the night of our escape. All my preparations have been made and everything is ready. I have stowed our luggage discreetly under the backstairs store, and arranged a trustworthy friend to collect us in a carriage purported to be delivering supplies for the ball. Lady Ayrton, Amelia as I now want to call her, is acquiescent and understands that I am trying to help her, and gladly something of a friendship has developed between us. At least, that is, during the daylight hours. When the sun falls, her rational mind continues to lose its grip, and she returns to her raving as if plagued by an unseen terror. She is both drawn to her child, as maternal instincts want to protect him, but at the same time, she is compelled to keep her distance. It is torture for her and baby Arthur, whose cries have not abated. As the nights draw in, their distress is redoubled. I feel it also, when I try to soothe him and a silence falls in the room as his gaze moves steadily over my shoulder. It penetrates through my skin and quickens my heart. I know that as soon as we are all out of this place, they will be able to find each other and take up the longing bonds of mother and son, and we will be free from this menacing darkness. November 2nd, 1887. It is over, and I am wretched. I know not how to describe the tragedy of what happened on the night we should have escaped. The plan did not succeed, and I still do not know how or why it failed. I was so careful. Everything was planned with precision. Even though I gave her a stronger draught of the sleeping tonic to prevent her nightly ravings from causing our discovery, I cannot fathom how she ended up downstairs, directly addressing Lord Ayrton so clearly. Not least how she managed to dress herself in her fine red velvet gown, and that heavy jade necklace. It was locked away, I was sure, but she was so relieved to be leaving. Why would she ruin our plan by revealing it to the very person we needed to keep it from? And the fire. The guests all fleeing. Everybody made it out. Everybody. Apart from her. The more I ruminate on the sequence of events, the less I understand. But it is done. Now she is gone, and we are left. Poor, poor Amelia. Her screams repeat in my nightmares when exhaustion permits me sleep. The image of her trapped in the flames is branded in my mind. She seemed trapped in that strange grasp, her arms held above her head by invisible hands as the fire ravaged her and took over the entire house. It burned the whole night, and I clutched Arthur to me as he wailed for his mother. The entire village tried to help douse the flames, but it was no use. I was only trying to help them. And now, I am embroiled. November 25th, 1887. We are returned to Blackheath Manor. It is by no means in a habitable condition, but Lord Ayrton will not tolerate our presence in the village any longer, and says we must live in the rooms which are bearable until the rest of the house is repaired. He remains in London on business for the foreseeable future. I anticipated much harsher treatment from him following the revelation of our plan, even that I would have to plead to remain the child's nanny. But he continues as before, grave, serious, and direct in his dealings with me. I know he has instructed Jim and Mrs. Dawson to keep a close watch on my movements and report back any suspicions. They hold me accountable for the tragedy, and I do not blame them. My only consolation is that I am to remain to look after young Arthur. It is the very least I owe him. His previous torment has been replaced with a strange stillness. He does not cry at nights now, but he does not sleep much either. His eyes wander still, but I do what I can to comfort him. And so we go on together, in this sad place, with only each other for company, and the ever-creeping darkness, always at our sides. November 1st, 1812. Blackheath Manor burns again. At first, I thought it was the usual illusion. The sight of flames engulfing the house has occurred every October 31st since the first blaze took Amelia from us. Like an echo of that tragic night, imprinted on the house as a scar. But it was not real. The house remained intact, and the blaze could only be seen from the outside of it. For us within, the smell of smoke and charred flesh seeped through the rooms. And the necklace. The necklace would somehow be released from its glass confines and come to lay on Arthur's pillow. The other staff would deny moving it, of course, but both the burning smell and the necklace were always gone by the morning. So, we accepted this oddity as part of the payment for our own lives, and carried on. The villagers called it witchcraft, and locked their doors to it and us, preventing their children from seeing the ghostly flames, at a loss to explain it with rational words when the house appeared untouched the following day. We were not made welcome in the village after that first year, so we found comfort in our solitude. Arthur and I together, in our own haven, bonded by love. But this year, it has come again, and taken my boy, my dear sweet Arthur. I thought he was safe. We had learned to live with the darkness. We knew it was always there, creeping in the shadows. But since Amelia, it had seemed to leave Arthur alone. It was placated. I should have known it would not last. I should have destroyed that damned necklace when I had the chance. Now, it has taken my darling child too. Its jewels still gleamed as it adorned his charred body. Oh, my poor boy. I am numb. This shall be my last entry, for I know not what worth there is in my words when I have nothing left to write for. I am made to pay for my actions. The darkness creeps towards me as the final flames from the blaze complete their destruction of the house. I can see him now. The devil who plagued Amelia and my poor sweet Arthur. His crooked grin coming ever closer. He places the jade necklace around my throat, and my heart dies with it.